I started watercolour about a year ago, thinking it would just be another art medium to learn, but it ended up teaching me a lot about patience, control, and how I actually like to work. I pretty quickly realised that it was teaching me about the way I want to work, and how patient I actually am, and how much control I need when I'm working. So if you're new here, hello, my name is Katie. I'm a mixed media sketchbook artist, and I started using watercolour early last year in around January or February 2025. Today I want to share 3 lessons from my watercolour journey and what it's taught me so far. Not necessarily as rules and definitely not as a tutorial, but more just things that I've learned by showing up and making a lot of imperfect paintings and a huge amount of play in my sketchbooks. So on to lesson number 1. The first thing that watercolour taught me was about colour mixing. Although my watercolour palette and my colours expanded pretty quickly because I learnt what was missing in my initial setup, and after many wonderful recommendations from all of you in the comments throughout my videos last year, I really think my colour mixing and my strength in understanding colour theory is thanks to watercolour. I learnt that not only does the colour obviously change depending on the dilution, but also about muddy colours and teeny tiny adjustments that make a big difference to the final colour. I found that with watercolour I could never mix the same exact ratio and the colour twice, so I definitely lent into the beauty of that. I actually learnt to love the inconsistency, from me using too much water or not getting enough pigment from my brush in the paint pan, and even not cleaning my palette enough, so it meant for some unplanned mixes too. I suppose this is kind of turning into another lesson that I learnt alongside this colour one, but it really helped me to be a bit more spontaneous with paintings and work with what turned out on the page. I loved mixing neutrals, I've definitely learnt that in the past year, and I added in colours that have become a real staple in my work. Buff titanium seems a bit of a controversial colour in watercolour, but it was a really great shade for me to transition from gouache because of the strong white pigment mixed in. I definitely am learning a lot about pigment as I go, and I'm certainly not an expert, but that's become one I use all of the time in my palette. My love for greens definitely grew hugely. I do love working with greens, obviously I'm a nature and landscape artist, but I've learned a lot more about the shades. Although I have lots of pre-mixed greens in my palette and my watercolour collection now, I rarely use them as is, and often mix them together or adjust them as I go. I am thinking of filming a whole other video about mixing colours and creating a cohesive painting using a base colour. I've kind of put that off because I didn't feel like I understood my own colour use enough, but watercolours definitely helped me learn why I do certain things. I learnt that my muddy colours often came from overworking and again with not cleaning my palette properly. And so that was definitely a lesson that I learnt quite quickly, and it still happens, I'm definitely not perfect, but making the mistakes definitely made me learn quicker. The second and probably the biggest lesson that watercolour has taught me is patience. Now I'm not shy in saying I'm a very impatient artist. I am patient in real life, but when it comes to art, I'm just itching to get going. I don't want to wait for things to dry. I want to get ahead and on to the next step. My favourite part with painting is adding on details and adding on more layers and getting to mix different mediums together. I am a mixed media artist after all. But when it comes to watercolour, in contrast to most of the other wet mediums I've used, it really doesn't dry fast. It uses a lot of water, of course, and so I have to wait. I have to wait to add on those details, and of course it is worth it. And it's actually helped me a lot learning to be patient. I know, roll your eyes, it makes sense. But having that chance to sort of step back and actually think whilst that first base layer dried really helped my paintings become a lot stronger. It made my art better because I wasn't rushing. I can think a bit more about the next step just by having that waiting time added. Sometimes I would come back to finish things the next day as well, which was unheard of before. I rarely finish a gouache or other mixed media piece in 2 sittings, but it's much more common when I'm using watercolour. I also learnt quickly that rushing this stage was definitely not worth it. Although you can of course get amazing textures and I really love playing with wet on wet, when it comes to adding on my details and next layers, it had to be dry. If you keep poking at it, it gets worse, so walking away is sometimes the most productive move. I'm definitely not shy on speeding up the process, and so yes, I do sometimes use a hairdryer. I'm still me and I still want to get going, but it has definitely taught me that patience here is actually kind of an active restraint, and it's definitely worth it. Some of my favourite pieces from 2025 in the past year have been painted with watercolour, and I'm so excited I gave it a go. Now this ties in with my final lesson, and the last one really changed the game for me. So lesson number 3 is learning to ignore the rules. I came into starting watercolour a bit scared. I felt like it's a sacred medium. I don't know if this is just me being silly, but it felt prestigious almost. I felt scared of bringing my haphazard, just do it anyway approach to something that, to me, felt like it should be very careful, very precise and accurate. Watercolour has a lot of rules. There's light to dark, there's, not overworking, you're not supposed to use white and use the page, and planning things in advance. And that is definitely not me. I am a messy artist, I'm impatient like I said, I don't sketch and I definitely don't like to plan things. Like I said before, I am impatient and I'm just too excited to get going. So this lesson was so invaluable for me, and I hope it is to you, whether it applies to watercolour or any other medium you want to try but have been scared to pick up. And that is to just do what you want to do. There are people who may judge you, but there always will be. There'll always be people who want to give their advice, whether it's solicited or not. But if you find joy in doing it your way, then I really encourage you to do that. Honestly, sometimes rules don't fit the way we want to work. And I'm not saying here that rules aren't there for a reason, of course they are. And they're a great thing to learn, especially starting out. But when you're ready, it's that cliche of learning the rules, and then being able to break them. I kind of skipped that because I wanted to break them immediately, but there are definitely a lot of things that I do that I know make other artists cringe. I know my swatching isn't delicate. I know I'm very heavy-handed. I know I don't work in an orderly way, and I don't treat my brushes very well. But the truth is, I am having so much fun when I create. I love painting in this way, and that's why I'm constantly encouraging people to do it. I really, really don't believe in rules when it comes to art, so it makes sense then that this medium of watercolour that I was so scared to try because of the rules I'd built up in my head only really clicked and worked for me when I decided how I wanted to use it. I used colours however I wanted to. I let things bloom and spread on the page where they weren't supposed to, just to see what happened, and then I used that as extra texture in my painting. I adjusted techniques to match my own pace. And I found that when I stopped trying to do watercolour the traditional way, I enjoyed it so much more, and I think you can see that in my art in my sketchbook pages. Now, I'm absolutely still learning watercolour, and I'm enjoying making a mess. I make mistakes all the time, and I'm constantly learning as I go. And I think that's really important as an artist, to be open to that, to not get to an end goal, similar to when I talked about art style in a few videos back, but that we should constantly be learning. As I always say, art is about the process and finding the joy as we create, so I'm definitely embracing that with this medium. If you're also learning something new, art or otherwise, I hope that this video helps you be a little bit kinder to yourself in the process. I've been sharing my process on screen as we go, so obviously some colour mixing and swatching at the beginning, then I painted the bears, and now these sheep in my sketchbook. But if you do have any questions about the process, then do let me know in the comments, and if there's anything you'd like me to talk about in more detail that I've mentioned during my 3 lessons I've shared with you, then please do share those too. I'd love to make the videos that you'd like to see from me this year, so ideas are always welcome. So a huge thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. I hope you have a creative week, and I will see you next Sunday in my new YouTube video. See you later.